Hello, Misfits, and welcome! In this episode, I am going to take you through the process of building your first character in Pathfinder. Now, when building your character, you kind of have a couple options. You have the Hero's Handbook, which is included in the beginner box, and then you also have the Core Rulebook, this big bad boy, which is kind of like your player handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide all rolled into one book. So you kind of have a couple options, but I want to sort of compare the two and kind of take you through all the steps of creating your own character. Now, small disclaimer, I am relatively new to the system of Pathfinder, as most of you guys know, but I really have enjoyed the process of learning along with you, and this is just the next step. So I, of course, wasn't going to miss out on sort of talking through this process and learning about it myself and helping you guys learn about it too. So at the start, you might be wondering, what should I use when creating my first character? I obviously am gonna have to recommend the Hero's Handbook. It's just simpler, and even though it has less options, it's not going to be so overwhelming. It's going to be a lot easier to get into the game for the first time, and it includes everything you need. It doesn't have all the extra bells and whistles, but it's everything you absolutely need. The Core Rulebook, of course, has more options, but it's also more overwhelming. And it can be just a little bit too much to look at times. But regardless, I'm going to keep talking through the process and comparing the two. So first, both books are going to tell you to create a concept for your character. Now, I will say the Hero's Handbook doesn't really elaborate on this much at all. It just sort of tells you to come up with an idea for your character, but it doesn't really go into much detail there. They kind of leave that all on you. The Core Rulebook is going to tell you to come up with a description, sort of maybe a base personality, and maybe decide what their faith is, things like that. It just goes into more detail, which will be the running theme for this video. Now, before we go any further in the character creation process, I'd like to take a moment to stop and talk about today's sponsor for this video, which is Describe. Are you itching to DM your own homebrew campaign, but you worry that you're going to struggle to bring your creations to life? Or are you running a published module, but you really want some extra detail to kind of take things to the next level? Or maybe you're completely burned out and find that inspiration has temporarily left you and you need a bit of a helping hand to get you back behind the DM screen. If that's the case, then I think Describe might be the perfect tool for you. Describe is an award-winning TTRPG publisher of descriptive text, immersive sounds, and interactive maps. On their site, you can search for a description of pretty much anything from places to spells to monsters to NPCs and characters. You can even request personalized descriptions be written for your own scenes and characters. To take things a step further, you can even explore their collection of maps, each complete with its own beautiful description tailored to that specific location. There are a variety of subscription tiers, each unlocking different features, but some of these are also available for free, so there's probably a little bit of something for everybody here on Describe. When I looked at Describe for the first time, I was pretty blown away by just the sheer number of things that they offer. I couldn't really begin to include all of those things in this video, but I would love to do a deeper dive into it just to sort of explore all the different things that you can unlock and use, because really just the level of polish here on their site is just really, really nice. This is just a tool for DMs and GMs that just want to take things to the next level, make their own games feel like that level of sort of professional polish that published games have. Yeah, and I just think that this is all just sort of to cater to you and help you out. So I strongly encourage you guys to check this out for yourselves. And also, if you use the code MISFIT, you can get 10% off your first subscription payment. So please be sure to check out Describe and really poke around and see what it has to offer. I will include that code MISFIT and a link to their site in the description below. Next, let's go to ability scores. So that's the next step. They kind of want you to kind of figure out your ability scores. Now, the Hero's Handbook doesn't really talk about ability scores. They kind of ignore this because they don't want to throw a bunch of numbers at you and scare you away. So they pretty much just skip these entirely and just focus strictly on modifiers. So you've got your base ability scores, and what those are determine what the modifiers are. Hero's Handbook just goes straight to the modifiers. The Core Rulebook is going to tell you that all of your scores start at 10. And as you pick things, as you go through the rest of the character creation process, you will add bonuses and flaws to those scores, which will affect that number. It could increase the number past 10 or even lower it. So that's a pretty key difference there. I mean, again, the Hero's Handbook, it's what you need at the start. The Core Rulebook is just sort of the next step further. So after that, we're going to go into Ancestry. So the Hero's Handbook really just gives you kind of like the big three, I guess. You have Dwarf, Elf, or Human. Those are your three options, and each come with 3 heritages. So I guess this is sort of a big departure from D&D. In D&D, you're gonna have races and maybe like variants or subtypes to those races. In Pathfinder, you're gonna have ancestries and heritages. So something to note there. It seems like Kobold Press and their Black Flag project is kind of doing a similar kind of thing where we're sort of moving away from race and we're going into this sort of kind of layout, which is interesting. I like it. In the Hero's Handbook, you get 3 heritages, and I should also say that your race in Pathfinder is going to determine your base HP, so that's what's going to give you your health at the start. Like, I think elves will give you 6 hit points, but humans might get you 8. And then your heritages are going to give you maybe special abilities or special bonuses, and things like that. In the Core Rulebook, it adds 3 more races, so it adds the gnome, the goblin, and the halfling. Also, instead of 3 heritages, it's going to have 5 heritages for each of these ancestries. And it's also going to introduce the concept of flaws, something that's kind of missing from the Hero's Handbook. So you might pick an elf, which might give you some bonuses to maybe intelligence, but it's also going to give you a flaw in constitution. I don't know if that's actually right. I'm just sort of spouting off the top of my head and taking a guess, but anyway, so that's a difference there. You have far more options, but again, that Hero's Handbook is really just everything you need. After you pick your ancestry, you're going into your background options. So these function very similarly to like a background in D&D, where you're picking like scholar or acolyte or things like that, and that will either get you special abilities or bonuses in certain areas. It sort of depends on what you pick. In the Hero's Handbook, you get 7 options. In the Core Rulebook, you have 35 options, and they're pretty varied. But those 7 options from the Hero's Handbook, those are pulled directly from the Core Rulebook, so it's not like you're it's not like if you look at one, you're missing the options of the other in terms of the core rulebook. So just something to note. I am not going to list every background. There are a lot. They're all very interesting, and they all give you different things. I encourage you guys to look at them for yourselves. And if you're thinking, well, I don't have the core rulebook or the beginner box, how can I look at those background options? Check out Archives of Nethys, and it's got everything on that site. You can look at all the backgrounds, even more than just what's in the core rulebook, and check things out there. After you pick your background, you're going to move on to class. In the Hero's Handbook, you get 4 options. You have the Cleric, the Fighter, the Rogue, and the Wizard. These are honestly kind of like the big 4. They kind of touch on the biggest things that most parties are looking for when they're trying to be balanced. These are also the same classes that their pre-generated characters are. So these are your 4 options. What you choose will sort of affect your HP and your other bonuses, your other modifiers, I should say. So if I picked an elf and started with 6 HP, and then I go on and choose a fighter, I believe that bumps that health up by 10. And so now we've got 16 HP, and then it's going to even tell you what to add to that to increase it even more. I think you add your constitution after that. So it kind of is going to take you step by step through that process. So the core rulebook has 12 options. It has the 4 that I listed above, and then it's going to add the Alchemist, the Barbarian, the Bard, the Champion, the Druid, the Monk, the Ranger, and the Sorcerer. Now, some of you might have noticed the Alchemist and the Champion are different, and you wouldn't have heard of those if you've only been playing Dungeons & Dragons. The Alchemist is going to be sort of unique to Pathfinder. It involves sort of creating and crafting different sort of potions and various things. And then you've got the Champion, which is going to function very similarly to the Paladin. Before I go any further with classes, I do want to talk about how when you pick that, you are going to be shown some class features. And those are going to be pretty consistent for both the Hero's Handbook and the Core Rulebook. The only difference is that the Core Rulebook will show you all the other class features that you can unlock as you level up, whereas the Hero's Handbook really only shows you the one for your current level, and then when it's time to level up, you flip over to that section, and it's going to show you your next additions or options. Also, both are going to show you some feats that you can sort of choose between when you pick your class. The Hero's Handbook presents them in almost like a subclass sort of way, where you're sort of like picking your combat style, and what you pick unlocks a different feat. In the core rulebook, it's just presented as feats, or at least as far as I can tell. And it has all the options that are in the Hero's Handbook, it just also has more. And each one is complete with a description that tells you what you can do. And these feats are sort of like, at least for like a fighter, for example, they're sort of different kind of actions or types of attacks and reactions and things like that. You can have an exacting strike or a power attack or a reactive shield. These are the kinds of things that we're talking about, and each of those will sort of function differently from each other. Now, the core rulebook adds 2 additional steps that are not in the Hero's Handbook. It adds determining your ability scores and recording your class details. So I can see why the Hero's Handbook kind of left these out. So 1, we don't really talk about ability scores in the Hero's Handbook. They kind of don't really talk about that. But also, when it comes to recording your class details, you can probably do that as you make your choices in those previous steps. Just sort of as you go, you're filling that out and writing those details down and determining what they are. So I can see why they were left out. But I should also point out that the core rulebook does incorporate more bonuses and introduces flaws. So with that, I can understand this difference because we've got a bit more math involved in the process. So now we move on to equipment. The Hero's Handbook has 7 pages of info on equipment, and the Core Rulebook has 24 pages of info on equipment. But, like I've pointed out before, the Hero's Handbook has everything you need to start out and take you through the 2 levels that adventure covers, whereas the Core Rulebook is set up so that you can have your character through its entirety, and so it's going to have a lot more equipment. It's going to have equipment for higher level characters and things like that. So that's something to keep in mind here. Now, when you go through equipment, you need to pay special attention to how that affects your AC, how it could impact your speed, any sort of penalties it could give you, because depending on what armor you choose, you might be too weak to really reap the benefits of it. But your armor can also greatly affect your AC and things like that. So that's something to keep in note. There's going to be a lot of sort of mini calculations that you've got to go through and double check, which sort of brings us to our last sort of section here, which is finishing your hero, or the core rulebook sort of breaks it down into a couple different sections. You've got calculating your modifiers, then finishing your hero. These sections are essentially the same. It's just one takes longer to explain it. Though, many of those tiny details that you're looking for when you have questions are going to be included in that core rulebook description. So, even though it's a lot, generally it's going to answer every question. But this is basically where you look at all of the things that you have chosen, your ancestry, your heritage, your class, all of that. And you go in and you do all the tiny little calculations. You have a bunch of different skills and saving throws and your AC and your health, and you need to go through and add and subtract all the things that apply to figure out what those final scores and modifiers are going to be. I made a character here using the Hero's Handbook to sort of take myself through the process. And this is also using their character sheet. But yeah, I sort of walked through the process and it was really, really easy to figure out. Even though it looks like a lot, I feel like if you have any sort of background in D&D, this is not going to be overwhelming to you at all. And even if you don't have a background, the way the Hero's Handbook explains everything, it's pretty easy, it's pretty straightforward. There was never a moment where I was going through this character sheet and thinking, what is this? What does this mean? Because it's literally all described in this book. And honestly, this one is going to describe it all too. It's just going to go into more detail. So, maybe if you're still confused from this and you need all the nitty-gritty details, the core rulebook is what you're looking for. So just something to keep in mind there. But yeah, so that's basically just sort of the process of walking through character creation. Obviously, I didn't go into every single nitty-gritty detail, but I mean, if you want me to do that, I can talk you through every decision I made when I made my little fighter that I just showed her character sheet of. I'd be happy to do that and just sort of walk you through that process. Just let me know in the comments below if that's something you might be interested in. Now, some of you might be asking why I bothered building a character when the beginner box comes with pre-generated characters. Well, many of you know that I run a table of 7 players, and we are preparing to go through the beginner box adventure. And honestly, I really want them to use the pre-generated characters, because I think that's just going to be like an easier way to introduce them to things. All that work is done for them. But I have 7 players, and there are only 4 pre-generated characters that come with the box. So I need to make 3 more characters to sort of fill out the party and make sure everybody has somebody to play as. So that's why I've been experimenting with character creation and things like that. For those of you that are freaking out about how 7 players for that beginner box adventure is totally unbalanced, don't worry. I've been DMing for several years now, and I fully intend to go through and rebalance all the encounters and make sure everything is going to work out and feel like the appropriate level of difficulty for them. So don't worry about that. I think I might include maybe 1 character made through the Hero's Handbook, but I think I might also add some that are made through the Core Rulebook, or maybe sort of a mix of Core Rulebook and Hero's Handbook. I might use the Hero's Handbook, Ancestries, and Heritages, but I might throw in a Core Rulebook class just to sort of flesh things out, because I mean, I don't want to double up on the classes too much, so that's something that I'm looking at. So just, I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on that, or let me know if there's any classes you think I should add to the set of 4 that they give you. I was definitely thinking Ranger and maybe another Spellcaster, but I'm not sure about the last one, so let me know. Something that's not too difficult for a beginner to grasp. But yeah, that is what I have done so far. But that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. So make sure that if you're interested in supporting my channel and myself, that you like and subscribe to Misfit Adventurers. All of that is really, really helpful to me. We've seen a lot of growth over the past couple months, and that's kind of been thrilling to see. So let's keep it up. Let's keep the ball rolling in that direction. And please leave a comment below. As I've said more than once before, I just love hearing from you guys. I love hearing what your experiences are and what you have to say. I definitely read all of them. I don't always have the chance to respond to every single one, but I'm definitely reading all of them. So make sure you talk to me a little bit in the comment section. But yeah, with that said, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, a wonderful week, and I will see you again next time. Yeah, so the character that I made here is an elven fighter. Her name is Tessara Linless. I don't know, I always like kind of trying to go outside the norm just a little bit, and I feel like a lot of times elves are either sort of agile and sneaky, or very regal and sort of spellcasty. So I wanted to pick something that was a little different. So I've got this sort of like rough and tumble elf that sort of has like a no-nonsense personality, and so that's what I went with here. Yeah, it was a pretty easy process. I'm really interested in seeing how the first couple games go. I've been talking about Session 0 and trying to figure out when's best to do that before we get into the adventure itself. So I guess just keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. Yeah. Anyway, that's it, guys. So I will see you next time. Have a good day.